Okay, everyone. Hi, you are back once again. I am the Zenith. This is another episode of the podcast, and today's very special guest is John Lee. John Lee is the founder of Custom Mobile App. It is a mobile app where he creates mobile apps for podcasters to engage and monetize audiences. He will create your own podcast app to your own specification using your current existing RSS feed. Nothing will change about where it's hosted, but you will be able to engage your audience in whichever sort of manner that you like. One example is to create and search, sell merchandise on that app simply for your listeners. And your app can be basically anything that you want with it. If you go to Google Play, you'll see one of their, or the App Store. In Apple, you'll see their one of the apps that they've created, which is called Superpowered Network, and that app was designed around spirituality, consciousness, mindfulness, social parenting. So it would be an app that I would consider us and John to create. On top of that, John seems to be a philosopher and enjoys deep, meaningful conversations, which is what we're going to get into today. But first of all, John, very, very welcome to you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Zenith. I'm a lay philosopher, not a professional philosopher.
We're all lay philosophers, I guess. Maybe professional philosophers are overrated. I think we're all philosophers. Anyone who has a philosophy or has a viewpoint in life can be considered a philosopher. So just before we get started, tell us a bit about your work, this custom mobile app that you've created.
Yeah, that's a small business I started over a year ago, and like you said, it's a custom mobile app agency. So we help podcasters and networks of podcasts have their own mobile apps on the App Store. So we can do that for our customers at a very affordable price. Right now, it's $25 a month if you're a single podcast. And if you're a network, it's $50 a month. So very affordable and then accessible for the average content creator to have their own presence on the app stores. So that's
okay. What does that get you if it's £25 or $25 a month? What sort of support? What sort of features?
Mm-hmm. That will get you your own app for your show on both app stores, and all of our features available to you, including selling merchandise like you mentioned, gathering all your different content into the app. So if you have video content on YouTube or Vimeo, plus a blog, plus your podcast, you can have that all in one space inside your app. And then the plus of having your own app is you can point your listeners or your consumers to a call to action. So if you want them to buy something or sign up for something, join your community, that's all in the same space. So that's the benefit of having your own app, like having your own website.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because unfortunately or fortunately for me, I've created a number of social media sites and I'm constantly trying to, I haven't created any content for this. I haven't really created any. I seem to have different types of listeners for different types of media. So there'll be some who would actually watch and listen to YouTube, which would be different to subscribers to the blog, which are different to people who just prefer the audio, who are different from people in the Telegram channel. So things like that. So the potential to be able to integrate all that into one app, so that everybody is just running off the one app, and no matter what I post goes into that one app is really, really useful. Yeah, I can really see the benefits of that. And this app, it doesn't require you to change service or change network or change host. No. So no matter what, go ahead.
The point that we want to drive home is you, the content creator, should not be doing extra work, right? So create your content, host it wherever you're hosting, and the app should just update with all your latest content. So we don't want our creators to be doing extra admin work to keep the app updated. That'll just update automatically.
Brilliant. How many's in the team?
Oh, how many are on the team? It's just me. It's my solo business. Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
Just over a year. I I say we, but it's really just me. I relaunched the website January of last year. So it's been, just over a year, growing steadily by word of mouth, no paid marketing or advertising. So.
Where did you get the inspiration from? Had you got a background in, developing apps, or was it just something that you just thought, or, had you maybe like one of these sort of inventors that had a number of different ideas, didn't quite work out until you hit on the idea that, really paid off?
I do work in technology. I'm a software product owner. I do have a day job still. I work for a company. But I've also wanted to own my own business for a long time. So I've been on this entrepreneurship journey for a couple of years, and I pivoted from my initial idea to this agency model, like I said, about a year and a couple of months ago. Initially, I wanted to build my own application, my own social podcast app, something like Anchor / Clubhouse, something like that. But it never really launched and got off the ground. So I found a way to pivot that into what I'm doing now as a service company.
Yeah, as I mentioned, seems to be a really good idea. As I said to you just before we were recording, if my social media takes off a bit, I'll definitely be calling on your services, because as I said, I can really see the benefit of that. So obviously you have that sort of technological side and that sort of development engineer kind of side, but we're here to kind of talk about philosophy, talk about meaning in life and stuff like that. And I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a pigeonholing of people, or maybe it's a bit of a narrow-minded thing, but how does someone grow up and have that sort of interest in that environment, but still have that interest in something seems to be completely at odds with?
Oh yeah, I have no explanation for that. I think people are fascinating because we don't choose our interests, right? They choose us. So I feel like I've thought deeply since I was a kid, but really, I think when I turned 30, around then, that I started thinking, again, more deeply about what I believe and why I believe what I believe. So I grew up a Christian. I am still a Christian. And probably around that age, I started, thinking through more logically, like why I believe what I believe. And that just started the journey of thinking through other questions. And when I do get a question in my head, I think I get like a physical reaction where I don't feel rested until I can think through that thing to the bottom and try to get to as a perspective on it. And then it kind of goes to rest at that point.
Yeah. Well, like you, I also grew up in the Christian faith, but because I couldn't get any of the answers that I was looking for, I rejected it. I kind of grew up in I don't know about you, but in a kind of sort of traditional, old-fashioned view of Christianity. Here in the UK or in Ireland, especially, the church has had a massive influence over the States. So we would have grown up in Christian schools and Christian-dominated thing, but obviously growing up in life and having this kind of burgeoning worldview and looking at current affairs and stuff like that and not finding any answers. It's just all this kind of hokey pokey in the sky. I ended up rejecting most of that, like I'm sure quite a lot of people do. And I just kind of buried myself until I had an awakening one day. I call it my spiritual awakening. I've mentioned it before. And find spirituality, which I had no idea about mediums, all this sort of stuff, and psychics. Didn't believe any of it. If you had said to me how many mediums are there or psychics, where you are, I would have said 5 maybe in the entire population. And of those who were genuine, I would have said 1. So I had no idea about that sort of thing. And even though I was going through what I consider to be a spiritual awakening, I had a hard time listening and still integrating Christian and religious concepts, and completely rejected the concepts of Christianity, about Jesus and stuff like that and all the rest of it, which a lot of people do. Fast forward many years later, and it's actually went full circle for me, where I've completely embraced a lot of the concepts that Christianity talk about, and explain and espouse, and certainly the teachings of Christ, but in a very kind of spiritual sense. So it's been a kind of full circle journey for me, where I just, kind of like that old Zen parable, where I can't remember who says it, but it goes something along the lines, before you start or undergo Zen, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. It's something like this anyway. After your first glimpse into the enlightenment or the truth of enlightenment of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains, rivers are no longer rivers. And after you obtain full enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and rivers are once again rivers. So it's this kind of ideas when your perspective, your paradigm shifts, nothing is real, everything is different until you eventually get sort of full enlightenment, or you are able to reintegrate things and things seem to be the same but are different in a way. So that's kind of how I feel about Christianity, and a lot of the themes from Christianity do play a part in my life, maybe just a bit different from the things. So I guess we just have stuff in common there. But again, like you, I'm never someone who's satisfied. I'm always looking for answers. If I get an answer to something, I'm always going, well, what's behind that? How does that integrate with that or whatever? And so I would consider myself a seeker of knowledge, a seeker of answers, whatever you want to call it. So I'm always asking those questions, and if I don't have the answers, I'm looking for someone who can potentially point me in the direction and give me those answers. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we're going to have a good conversation about some of the things we're talking to. So we were just kind of talking about meaning in our lives and what gives our lives meaning. And I guess we're riffing off each other, but you just kind of explained it as being down to experiences. Our experiences give meaning in our life. Certainly the most intense experiences: childbirth, falling in love, having purpose to our life, centered purpose. These intense experiences give meaning to our lives. They shape the people that we become. They inform us, they determine our personality, they determine how we interact with society. Would you agree with that, or do you think that's a good start maybe to get into?
Yeah, I think so. So I think when we're living to our fullest, we realize that we're living, that situation, that experience is very meaningful. So the examples I gave when I reached out to you, like having a child, that feels very meaningful. Saving a life, that was one of the examples I thought of a couple of weeks ago. Like, if I'm not a firefighter or anything, but I can imagine if I were an EMT and I were trying to save a life, I would be very present. I probably wouldn't be even aware of what's going on around me. I'd be so focused on saving that life, doing CPR or something. And what I was doing would be of ultimate significance. Like, it would feel meaningful because I've got a clear goal, a clear purpose: save this person's life. And that whole experience is going to feel like it matters. It's going to feel significant. And so it's hard for me to find the words for that, but like that situation, I think is an example of a person living to their fullest. And there are other examples of that, but just sticking with that example, I think when we feel that way, when we feel like we're doing something meaningful and we're engaged in something meaningful, I think it, like I mentioned, there's a purpose involved in that. Usually we're going after a purpose. I think that feeling of meaning points to not just like an immediate purpose or a subjective purpose that I've created for myself, but I think it points to an objective purpose, a purpose for me. And I think, so going off of that idea, is my subjective experience of meaning, is that just a subjective feeling, or is it also an objective fact? Is it a fact of the universe, a fact of my life that I do have a purpose that's coming in from the outside, that's being imposed on me from the outside? So, I think it does, because as a Christian, within my worldview, that makes sense. It makes sense that God made me, He loves me, and therefore He has a purpose for my life. So I guess it corresponds, like that worldview corresponds to my experience of meaning. So there's this correspondence there between lived experience and that worldview. So maybe you can riff on that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, from the perspective of someone, I don't really like to use the term spiritualist because it's too broad. Even within that category of spirituality, there are many different beliefs and philosophies and stuff like that. It's too broad for me. I obviously someone who sort of integrates a lot of philosophy and terms within their life. Within that, it would be informed by Buddhism, it would be informed by Christianity, it would be informed perhaps by Hermetics, it would be informed by a great text that has made a massive impact on my life called The Law of One. But basically, I think that potentially we don't quite know the full extent of Christianity. A lot of the teachings of Jesus are still unknown. And there's a train of thought to suggest that when we talk about the resurrection, that term is potentially modified from the reincarnation. So there's a train of thought, and I think there is some evidence to suggest that the concept of reincarnation has been modified, left out of modern day Christianity. So the Christianity, as we kind of know it, has a lot of relation to a lot of other philosophies and religions, i.e. the concept of reincarnation. So from my perspective, we constantly come into a life until we learn enough in that life to no longer need potentially that, or to be free of this idea of karma. And I think that one of the things that and certainly while we're here in this life, we could be looking at, we hate the term woke or woken up, or not quite in the term as in look at I'm aware of, these terms, but woke as in, I've woken up in life, I've woken up as in I understand what life is, I understand, what my purpose is in life. I understand that there's a bigger picture, I have a connection with God in some personal manner. So I think for me that defines the term woken up in life, and we hear about this great shift, this great waking up in life. But for me that's one of the things that can help along that journey, or that can trying to get the words out here, that can really help us wake up, and that is by having these deep experiences, by having these deep meanings in our life, because they feel real. It like touches on a deeper side than just surface emotions, surface interactions with people, rather than perhaps we mentioned some great ones: saving a life, falling in love, giving childbirth, being a victim of a hijacking, at one point seeing your life flash in front of your eyes, things like that there. They give deep meaning to our lives and touch us in a way that can't really be explained, and really potentially change our lives for good or for bad. So I think that in my worldview, everyone has a purpose in life, and that purpose is to, through interactions and experiences like these, which I would call catalysts. Catalyst is something that promotes change. So we have catalysts that affect us every day through experiences like you say, and these are our experiences, these are events that make us go inside and think a lot more about our life, about our purpose in life, about why we're here, what we're doing, whether that was an amazing experience like falling in love, saving someone's life, childbirth. These experiences touch you and make you kind of not quite retreat from the world, but go inside yourself to think what life is all about. Now I have a child, I'm responsible for that child, I am a responsible person. It's up to me to fill this child and fill that child up with whatever that I have experienced in my life. Should I fill this child up to tell the child to be cynical and get rid of economist word, or fill that child up and teach this child that we should learn to respect everyone else and everyone's fair in life. And falling in love is another great one. It's a very overused commodity love. It's a very kind of, people look at it as a wishy-washy thing, but it's something that touches you almost like nothing else in this world. It completely and utterly changes you as a person. Not only you falling in love with another person, but then your interactions with everyone else are changed by the touch of that love. In a similar way, being a victim of a robbery, being a victim of assault, of a rape, being involved in a almost fatal car crash can also inform how we look at the world and touch us deeply inside, but perhaps in a different way. People who are involved in that, they're potentially without looking as to why this happened to me and what can I do to grow up from that, can react in a different way. Well, I got no luck, or I was involved in this and the world didn't stop for me, so why should I potentially help everyone? So I think that when deep experiences happen like this in our life, they force us to do a lot of introspection. They force us to examine life, they force us to look at our relationship with ourselves, with others, with society at large, with God themselves. As I just mentioned there about these so-called negative experiences, people then can look at God and blame God, and why did you let this happen? Why have I had to go through this here? Whereas other people who have those blissful positive experiences are potentially there and go to thank God and praise God and stuff like that. So I think that everyone has a purpose in life, and that purpose is to respond to life through these challenges and these experiences that we have. And this serves the type of life that we have, and potentially, according to your beliefs, potentially the next life that we may have.
Yeah. So I'm listening to you and I'm hearing you believe in a purpose, an objective purpose from the outside. It's imposed on human beings. I'm also hearing a lot of language on values. So the purpose is values laden. This purpose is for human beings to become quote unquote better human beings, more responsible, I heard more loving. So all that I agree with. From my perspective, I feel like when I think about purpose, and even behind purpose, love, when I think about love, I think you and I both agree, sorry about that.
Okay.
You and I both agree that love is very important. I think love is at the center of reality. And like you said, at the end of our lives, we're not going to care what our jobs were. We're not really going to care how much money we've made or how many things we've collected. We're going to care, we're going to want around us the people that we love and the ones that love us. I think that's a huge signal that the essence of who we are is somehow tied up very tightly with love. Love is the most important thing at the end of the day to us. And I think that makes most sense with a God who is love. God is love. He described himself as love, and being the creator puts love at the center of reality. Is kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. And so I'm going back to this idea of our personal experience seems to correspond to that particular worldview. When I think about what you said, purpose, being values laden, including love, what grounds that purpose? Where's that purpose coming from? And as well as the values that are embedded in that purpose.
Well, for me, I've kind of heard this right. This ties into the concept of free will. Yes, absolutely, I agree with you there, and we're both on the same track here, that love is the foundation for everything. And when we talk about God, the Creator, we're talking about something that is very intimate, but at the same time very unknowable. It's so vast and so beyond the human concept that we can't really comprehend how vast this idea of God is. But at the same time, and this is what's that great word? I can't remember, it might have come back to me. This is the paradox. Because although we have this vastness, this thing beyond human comprehension, it's still intimately knowable. And that knowable, when you feel that love in whatever shape or form, you understand what this idea of God, the Creator, is at its core. So it's a complete paradox, but at the same time, I think that in my beliefs, everything was created by this God to experience what it's like to not be God. So everything that we experience, everything that is in this universe, not just living sentient beings, but everything, we could say we're standing God, we are drinking from God, we are breathing God, everything and everyone is God. So this God diversified itself in a manner to experience what it's like not to be God. And part of that was this concept of free will. You are free to do what you want, because no matter what way you do it, it still functions, still to kind of give these clunky mechanical terms, to function and to serve the purpose of giving God an experience of what it's like not to be God. So while we're here on this planet, we hear this in Christian terminology anyway, this concept of free will. Why doesn't God step in? Because, humans are free to do what they want. So I think we have this idea of free will. We are free to do what we want. I can go out and I can shoot someone tomorrow. That's my choice. As a free-willed human being, that does not mean to say there will not be earthly consequences, because we're still bound by earthly laws, but universal laws are completely different from this. Without getting into the idea of what karma and stuff like that is about, we're free to do what we want, and there's, as I said, this idea of meaning, of catalyst that comes to us in order to shake us from our reverie, our kind of, if you can understand what I'm saying, in order to help get us to wake up as to what is the purpose of life. Why are we here? What are we doing alive at this time? Why am I here? What is my ultimate goal in life? Is it just to simply exist in the material world? Is it to gather as much resources as I can to be possible to lead a comfortable life? Or is there greater depth? Is there greater meaning to this life? And I think that, in my beliefs anyway, in order to help us to realise, because if we look around the world today, a lot of people reject the idea of God, reject the idea of a creator. A lot of people, vast majority, have subscribed to a religion, but simply give lip service to that religion. They go and they listen to their priest, their imam, their rabbi, and hand all their power to this person. The rabbi, the priest, the imam, says a few holy words, whatever, absolves them, and then they go about their daily lives without giving really any sort of depth of meaning or any sort of greater thought as to who they are, what they're doing. So I think that even in that category there, people don't really have that depth of thing. And so this is what I say about these catalysts, these experiences that come into our lives. They're there to help shape us. They're there to force us to do the inside. They're there to help us re-examine our relationship with God. If that kind of makes sense. They're there to force us to look inside, because ultimately that's where we're going to find God. That's where we're going to find this idea of God, or where God is. It's inside. And we can respond in one of two ways. We can respond in a loving manner, which is what God is all about, or we can respond in a kind of negative manner, which is a separation from God. But in the same way, I guess it's easy to be loving. It's easy to talk about our relationship with God, about how our lives are great and everything is lovely, and everything is sunny in our life, when we have those deep experiences that are centered around love. It's harder to find love, and it's harder to find this idea of God when we're going through those so-called negative experiences and so-called negative events. But another way of looking at that, in my experience, is that these are not negative events. These are gifts that are being given to you in order to stop you in your tracks, to make you examine inside and to become detached from the physical world around you, and to re-examine then your relationship and cultivate a deeper relationship with God. So I guess for me, it's this idea of divorcing from the physical world, recognizing that you're not just a physical being who is separate from God and from everyone else, that you truly are an immortal part of God, and it's through experiences such as trauma and stuff like that you can really learn that, along with obviously experiences of joy.
There are 4 or 5 different places I want to take this conversation, but just a brief stop here is, do you believe that there is such a thing as injustice, like real injustice? You mentioned rape, right? If a person is raped, is that an act of injustice?
That's a tricky one now, because this is a kind of tricky concept, and again, it depends upon your belief system. It depends upon what you believe. If we believe in reincarnation, we believe that we are here multiple times, and the Buddhist philosophy suggests that the only way to stop the cycle of reincarnation is to become karmically free, to incur no karma. Karma, in my opinion, I've talked about this before, is if we were all a mirror to each other, if you were to jab your finger in your mirror at your reflection and potentially throw a punch, you're only throwing it at yourself. So anything that we do to another person is reflected back at us. So it comes back at us. So we can talk about that idea of committing an act or an act of injustice upon someone else, which means that we become karmically entangled in that, and we have to potentially face earthly laws. But as I mentioned, we also have these spiritual laws where we're going to have to make re-preparations for that. And I guess one of the ideas of this here is, I would tie it into this idea of catalyst. We commit an act of aggression, an act of violence upon another person. It's going to come back at us in some way, some sort of hardship that we will encounter in our lives, not as a punishment, but as a way of self-reflection. To re-examine our life, but because potentially sometimes a lot of time passes between that original act of aggression and potentially this idea of karma coming back to us, we don't not necessarily associate with that act that was happening. We also have the idea of, in a lot of spiritual teachings, that we come into this life with lessons to learn. And these lessons are based, and I guess it still ties into this idea of karma. These lessons are potentially carried over from previous lifetimes, until we can learn to grow and learn to love without thinking. This is what the great teachings of Jesus is. And Jesus is not just a Christian person, is not just a Christian prophet, but when you look at Jesus, the history of Jesus, you find that his teachings and the person that he was is widely revered in many different cultures. Islam, the great Indian yogis, self-realization fellowship are revered Jesus and his teachings. These idea of these channeled higher beings, they always talk about the importance of Jesus and his message. So for me, Jesus is universal. But to get back to that point, was his message was love, and this was the love that we're getting back to. So our idea on this earth is to learn the idea of love, which when we love enough, we have compassion, we have forgiveness, we have non-judgment, we have not wanting to inflict anything upon another person. So this ties in with the Buddhist faith of non-judgment. So these are some of the lessons that we need to learn, and sometimes in spiritualist teachings we need to learn the opposite of what we previously had in our lives. So there's a line of thinking to suggest that sometimes people who are the victims of violence in some way were perpetrators in a previous life. Sure. It's maybe not quite as simple as that, but there is some idea around that. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated. But it's this idea of potentially making repatriations for maybe the life that you led in a previous life, and also these deep traumatic experiences and how we need to learn to grow and evolve beyond them.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, when I've thought about, and everything you've said makes sense to me. When I've thought about karma in the past, this was the reason that I had to reject it, because it seemed to me the logical conclusion of that principle is that there is no injustice. Everything that happens right now is the perfect working out of you call them spiritual laws. So when a person is a victim of violence, yes, that's a terrible thing that happens, but that is the working out of karma in that person's life. And so so when I thought about that, I was like, I can't accept that. When I see suffering in the world, I can't accept that. That is the just rewards for that person from a previous life. And then when I thought about the implications of karma for things like charity, like acts of charity, giving to the poor, well, in terms of karma, it seems to me like, well, the poor are poor because they deserve it, because of the way they lived previous lives. It seemed to remove any motivation for trying to change things, the current state of things. And so there was a lot of cognitive dissonance for me when I thought through the implications of karma. I couldn't hold on to that.
Yeah, it's not an easy concept, and I guess all of these concepts are not easy. But I think what we have to remember is that while we're here in this human body, we are very limited. We have human emotions, we have human feelings. And that's exactly the way it's meant to be, because this is a learning place, this is a school for learning. So we're not meant to have that deep connection to God, I guess, where everything is knowing, because if we did, we would have nothing to learn while we're here. Again, these are only my philosophy. You're free to accept or reject anything. So the idea of karma is a kind of tricky one, but ultimately God loves us, and this love is there at all times. It is us with our own human experiences and our own human feelings, if you like, and our own human ideologies and our busy lives that constantly forgets that love is there at all times. It's only a case of retuning ourselves. So it makes life very difficult for us down here, and even if you have felt that deep love from God, and have had that deep connection, and have felt that, and have had experiences where you're completely out of this body, it does not ultimately stop you from experiencing and looking at traumatic events and reacting to them on a very human emotion or a very human level, because we still are very human in this body and subject to human states of consciousness. So although I may talk about love, and although I may espouse Jesus' teachings amongst great other masters and talk about the idea of forgiveness, of empathy and compassion, when I look at events in the world, potentially the Ukraine crisis, COVID, the actions of our governments, how short-sighted and how reprehensible they are. When I look at the disparity in the world, when I look at the wealthy elite 1%, and how that wealth could be redistributed to people without clean sanitation, water, I still react to those events on a human level. Even though I know that, or even though I believe that that everything is happening for a reason. We also, I guess, we have to look at the idea of that we have what's called soul agreements between two or a number of people, in which they agree to play certain roles. So another idea of this here is that we're all playing roles, and like we're role playing. You know, it's a stage, and behind the stage, we're all friends with each other. But on the stage, we're in these bodies, we're playing roles, and that's potentially in order to help us learn and grow. Well, I'm going to play the role of the bad person. I'm going to play the role of the sheriff, and you play the role of the gangster. You know, but I guess these roles are to help design to learn us grow and evolve as the spiritual beings we are, and discover that love within us that ultimately is theirs and is our birthright.
Mm-hmm. Can I poke a little bit at the idea of love? And again, you talked about the purpose for all of us is to self-actualize and learn on this journey. Is the God that you speak of, is that a personal God? I only ask because when I think about love and I think about learning these lessons that we talked about just previously, I feel like these are all interpersonal concepts. Like love, to me, when I think about what love is, doesn't make sense outside of an interpersonal context, person to person. So that's why I ask, is the God that you believe in a personal entity or a personal being?
Well, for me, as I mentioned, it's I guess we're all sparks of the divine, you know, whatever way you want to call that. Even in Christianity, we talk about having souls that are ultimately going to reunite with God, and that's obviously a concept with just different language that I believe. So the God that I know is the creator of all things. And again, I'm only trying to explain this in human terms because it's outside of my concepts. So I guess it's like trying to explain to a child the banking system. You take your penny, you take your penny, you put it here, and after a time, you water that penny, it grows into 2 pennies. So, although we know the banking system is a lot more complicated than that, we can only explain it in very simple terms. So, when we talk about the concept of God, we can only talk about it through our own very, very limited human experiences. And perhaps maybe the experiences that I've had through deep meditations, where I felt that love. But so we have this concept of God as the creator of every single thing. So we tend to define that God as an entity, as a source of all things. We tend to put a name on that God: he, she, them, it, God, even the word God itself, to describe something that we can't really fully grasp. So we talk about a God as a singular entity, but then when we talk about the God that is inside all of us, when we talk about this concept of going inwards to try to find God, we discover a God that's personal to us based on our experiences. So I recently had I've had a few Christian people on interviewing them, and we haven't thrown about the idea of God. We've talked about this concept of God, and although we've used different terminology, we're describing the same thing, but only based upon our own experiences. So the God that I've described is personal to me, the Jesus that I might talk about is personal to me, based on the experiences that I have had. So the God that I know is personal to me, but at the same time, it's the same God that everyone else experiences. In the same way that when I look at another human being, when I look at you, I see John Lee in front of me. I see the person you are, the ethnic person, the nationality, the hairstyle you are. When you look at me, you see a white Caucasian guy with sort of a mop of a hairstyle or whatever. So we look very different to each other. So we would sometimes say, you're you and I'm you, but underneath this bag of clothes that we have, which we call a body, we're still that singular part of the divine, that singular spark. So ultimately we are all one. An analogy that I had when I was doing a spiritual practice is the analogy came to me of a snow globe. When we hold a snow globe far away from us and we shake it, we see just a mass of snow, I guess. So from that perspective, everything, or I guess, sorry, let me rephrase that. When we hold that snow globe close and we peer inside it, we can see each individual snowflake. We can see, well, there's that snowflake, there's that snowflake, there's that. They're all individual snowflakes. But when we push the snow globe far away from us, it becomes one mass of snowflakes. So it's a question of perspective at the end of the day. It depends on your perspective. If you think about people and your interactions with people on a one-to-one basis, you're going to think that that's them. But when you think about the world as a whole, when you think about God as a whole, you begin to realise that we're all one at the end of the day. So I think there's 2 perspectives that you can have, and it is a matter of perspective. You can say the God that I know is a personal God, based on my experiences, but at the same time, it's still all the same thing. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is you do believe in a. When I say personal, I mean a consciousness. Like it is self-aware. It relates to us, like you and I are relating. Of course, more than that.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I'm not 100% certain on this here, but the philosophy that I believe, the philosophy that really strikes home to me, suggests that this God that we know, and I guess it's the same sort of thing, just with different words in Christian terminology. Somehow it became a word, somehow it became, although it wasn't always, it's not that it wasn't always aware, it was, it just had no frame of reference to itself. So it formed, it had a kinetic, it had a potential, and out of that kinetic, and out of that potential, came the concept of free will, came the concept of the idea of it could be something other than what it was, which is everything. And so that concept came of this reference point to the self, in which it could experience itself subjectively to itself. And out of that idea, out of that concept, formed something else, formed a sort of consciousness independent of itself. And this consciousness independent of itself, I guess you could turn around and say, well, I've now created you, which you're a part of me. You now have the free will to go and do what you want. And so this consciousness that was sort of itself, but independent of itself, came up with the idea of how can I best create what the oneness that is me is looking for. Out of that kind of sort of idea, this sort of consciousness that was separate, came this idea of diversifying. It came with the idea of a universe in which material universe would have come into being and would be populated by all these individual pieces of consciousness on this vast array of things. So every single living thing, including flowers, plants, trees, has a form of consciousness. It's just that we don't look at it like that because we can't interact with trees and stuff. And some people, obviously suggest that you can. So this idea of yes, there's absolutely a consciousness, a type of consciousness that goes well beyond anything that we can understand, but out of that idea of wanting to experience something other than itself, it came up with this idea of diversification, and out of that came the material universe. And this is the journey that every living single thing is on, this journey back to that consciousness, and everything feeds back into that and forms.
So, okay, I'm going to have to go in a minute or two, but everything you're saying, I hear a lot of resonance with what you just said and described with the Trinity. So the Trinity is at the heart of the universe, at the heart of reality, is this relationship between three persons. So there's diversity and unity within this idea of the Trinity. So the source of reality is both one and many. And then there's love. Love, like I said earlier, is an interpersonal phenomenon. And so if at the center of reality is this tri-personal loving relationship, that again seems to me a good foundation for what we experience as love being the center of our experience, the most important thing in the universe. And then everything kind of going back to that also kind of makes sense. Like as Christians, I think there's an idea that we are folded into that relationship. We are participating in that love relationship that God has had from forever, for all eternity, within the three persons. So we're participating, and that is the goal of our lives. To enjoy and experience that.
I would say for me anyway, because I've just asked this recently, because we were kind of talking about this, where does this idea of a Trinity, as in the Christian type of Trinity, come from? If we're talking about this idea of spirituality and informed with the law of one. And sort of the answer sort of came to me that we are a representation of the Trinity. We as human beings, we are mind, body, spirit. If God is the spirit, if Jesus is the body, then the Holy Spirit must be the two connecting, must be the force that connects them. So it's the mind that connects the spirit with the body. So in a way, we could look at ourselves as being an embodiment of the Trinity. And the love that you mentioned is, I guess, it's this underlying force, this principle, which this creator used as part of free will to create this universe. And an embodiment of that in this physical reality is light. So light is actually a reflection of the force of love that is what was used to create the universe. So when we talk about God's love, we talk about this underlying force that was used to create everything in existence, and light then is a reflection of that. So when we say love is all around, we talk about light. Light is love. Love is light.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, in Christian terms, love is, I think, the motivation for creation. So God created everything motivated by his love for, to share his love and to express that love in all creation, in mountains, in men and women. I've never heard of light being like a physical representation of love, but I think back to Genesis in the beginning. I think, I forget what the phrase is, but like he said, "Let there be light," right? So that's like the first thing that he.
Yeah, it's the word. It goes back to the idea of the logos. I can't think it was Paul who used that word, the logos. And again, this idea of the logos in my philosophy is the term that was described to describe this sort of consciousness that became independent of God. So it was called the logos, which is the word made flesh, and this logos diversified itself into these sub-logos, which were responsible for things. And in the physical universe, these logos, these sub-consciousness of God, are sun, which creates light, which is the life giver in this. So we could say against Jesus, the Son of God, I am the Son of God, God's Son. I don't know, there's stuff to play around with. It's interesting.
It is, yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you for the conversation, Ben.
Absolutely welcome, John. I'd love to have you back and throw some more of these. So whenever you have something else that tickles your mind, perhaps we could go back and maybe make this more of a regular feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed our conversation and had lots to think about, take away.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I really, really enjoyed it. I didn't know how I was going to go tonight, especially sort of suffering the effects of this thing. And I was like, oh, am I going to be able to speak? But this is actually, I've just found that this is actually where I work best, when I'm just able to throw ideas and concepts about. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this. Apologies that it didn't happen sooner, but I'm really glad you accepted again, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Me too. Take care.
If anyone's looking to get a hold of your app,
they can find me at custommobile.app. That's the URL.
Absolutely fantastic, John. Thank you once again. Have a safe journey, and I'll speak again to you soon.
Thank you.